A winter of second chances. January, Los Angeles. The email arrived just after dawn, when Los Angeles is tender and undecided, when the sky remembers it can be soft. Dakota Johnson was standing at her kitchen counter with her hair still drowsy from sleep, grinding coffee by hand as if coaxing the morning to speak. The subject line was simple enough to be suspicious. Winter sun, offer. She opened it, skimmed, stopped, and reread. A European co-production, an intimate, character-driven drama about two people who meet on a windswept island to rebuild a lighthouse, and themselves. A director she admired for his patience with silence. The kind of script that asked for breathing more than acting. And then the line she didn't expect to see. Proposed lead actor, Jamie Dornan. Dakota set the grinder down and listened to the little hush that followed. Across the room, a lemon on the counter caught a stubborn ribbon of light and glowed like it knew something. She poured coffee and walked to the window. It had been years since they'd worked together. Years since they'd let the world have its arguments while they protected what they could of their private weather. They had grown up separately, learned separately, healed separately. The idea of sharing a set again felt both impossible and, somehow, inevitable. As if time had been folding the two of them toward this moment the whole while. She replied with the only sentence she could trust. I'd like to read the script on paper. Please send by courier. Then she stood with the coffee cupped in both hands and felt the quiet rearrange itself around her. Belfast, the same morning. On another coastline, Jamie Dornan was watching rain make lace on the window of his kitchen. He loved mornings like this. The house humming softly, the world still deciding on a mood. His phone vibrated once on the table. A message from his agent. Winter sun, script plus offer. Director insists on you reading before passing. Potential pairing with Dakota Johnson. He smiled without meaning to. It wasn't nostalgia. Nostalgia, he'd learned, could be a trickster. It was something steadier. Relief that life sometimes designed a bridge where he had expected only a river. He made eggs for the kids, packed lunches, kissed foreheads, tied one shoelace again, put a note in a pocket. You've got this. And watched them vanish into the ragged blue of the morning. When the house returned to silence, he opened the PDF. On page 3 he slowed down. By page 12 he had forgotten he was reading. By page 30 he had begun to hear her voice on certain lines. The way good writing tempts you with ghosts. He texted his agent. Let's read it properly. And quietly. No noise. He meant, let's keep the world out for as long as we can. The table read. They didn't stage a press announcement. They didn't plant a story. A week later, in a small rehearsal room in Santa Monica that smelled of dust and stubbornness, they read the script aloud with the director, a cinematographer with sea salt in his beard, and a patient casting director who arranged pencils as if they were compass needles. When Dakota walked in, she carried a tote bag with a book peeking out, and her face wore the kind of composure you earn. Jamie stood, almost out of courtesy to his own pulse. Hi, she said, like a word that had been waiting for its turn. Hi, he answered, pleased to discover that the syllable still fit. They didn't hug, they didn't perform. They sat. The pages rustled their dry applause. And for the next 2 hours, two people who had once been legends in other people's imaginations became, simply, the lighthouse keeper and the engineer whose life had folded on itself and asked for unfolding. The script was deceptively simple: storms, beams of light rotating through fog, a stone spiral of stairs climbed again and again until the ascent turns into prayer. They spoke lines about weather and wood, about loss and the way a coastline can teach a person to wait. Between the lines, they spoke another language entirely, eye lines meeting and sliding away, breaths landing in the same bar, pauses shared like bread. At the end, the room held that cautious silence good art invites. The director looked at them the way a cartographer looks at a mountain he has only suspected from a distance. I think, he said, we may have a film. Dakota lowered her script. Let's build it, she said. Jamie nodded. One stone at a time. Outside, the afternoon had sharpened. Los Angeles sun, indifferent to winter, insisted on being generous. They stood on the pavement with the kind of small awkwardness that belongs to thresholds. Coffee? He asked. Tea, she smiled. But yes. The walk to tea. They chose a cafe that civilized its music and didn't punish people for thinking. The waitress brought a pot of peppermint tea and a thick white mug for Jamie's coffee. They didn't speak about the old days. Not yet. They spoke about the script, about the way the lighthouse almost felt like a third lead. It's an apology, Dakota said, stirring nothing with her spoon. To ourselves, to time. Not because we were wrong to be young, but because we took so long to forgive our own youth. He laughed softly. I like that. And I like that it's about fixing something that doesn't belong to you. The lighthouse has been there before you. It will be there after you. But for a season, it needs your hands. Exactly. She looked at him across the rim of her tea. How are your hands these days? Steadier, he said. Yours? More honest, she said, and it felt like an oath. They talked about their families without biography, about the books that had finally taught them how to read themselves, about long walks that make you patient because the horizon refuses to hurry. When they parted on the sidewalk, there was no fanfare, only the feeling of a door opening on well-oiled hinges. Rehearsals begin in February, he said. I'll bring a good coat, she said, and the way she said it made February feel like a promise. February, the island. They shot on a small Atlantic island whose gulls were sarcastic and whose stones had seen worse than cameras. The lighthouse stood with a dignity that did not condescend to be picturesque. Inside, the narrow stairs turned the crew into pilgrims. Outside, the wind rehearsed its one long sentence and never ran out of breath. The first day, they filmed them arriving separately on a rusted ferry. She clutched a map that had no kindness in it. He clutched a toolkit that had seen better arguments. The camera loved the space between them, the distance that says more than any embrace. Between takes, they found the old rhythm by refusing to search for it. She wrapped both hands around a thermos and stood looking at a line where sea negotiated with sky. He sat on a coil of rope and learned his dialogue aloud as if telling it to the gulls. Do you ever feel, she said one afternoon when the wind paused to breathe, that all the roads were bringing us back to this kind of work? I do, he answered. And I'm glad we took the longer route. We're better at listening now. The director, a person who believed in protecting moments the way a beekeeper protects a queen, gave them space. The cinematographer kept framing them as people who might almost touch and might not. The island, indifferent to plot, threw storms when it pleased. On day 8, the rain arrived sideways and the lens fogged and the AD suggested they cut early. The director refused. This is the scene, he said, his voice calm in chaos. Grief doesn't wait for weather. They filmed them hauling a crate of new glass panes up the spiral when the steps are slick and your body is a negotiation. Halfway, they stop, and he says, not looking at her. You don't owe me the version of yourself that survived other storms. She answers, not looking at him. And you don't owe me the lighthouse that was here before you. They reach the top. They look at the lantern room. They look at each other. They breathe. Cut. No one spoke for a long moment. The island pretended not to watch them. A town with one piano. When the weather gave them a weekend, the crew found the island's single pub, which had a piano in the corner and a courtesy toward strangers that comes from knowing you'll see them again tomorrow. The sound mixer played a song older than his beard. The key grip harmonized like a man getting away with a secret. The gaffer, it turned out, knew every verse of anything. Jamie and Dakota sat at a small table with a candle that refused drama and laughed at jokes that required nothing but inclusion. In laughter, something settled that had been hovering. He leaned in. Do you remember, he asked, how badly we tried to be experts at 29? She winced, then grinned. I remember believing expertise could protect me from feeling. How'd that work out? It didn't, she said. But it taught me to prefer the truth. They didn't discuss the past by inventory. They honored it the way you honor a landscape you've crossed, with a quiet nod from a distance. Later, when the pub was almost empty and the candle had learned humility, the pianist began a soft waltz. Without ceremony, without invitation, Jamie stood and held out his hand. "Only if you lead," she said. "I was going to ask you to," he confessed. They negotiated in 4 calm steps and then didn't have to negotiate anymore. No one filmed them, no one posted, it was theirs, and it looked ordinary, which is to say it looked like grace. Letters you can send. Sundays became letters. The schedule's mercy offered them a few hours alone with paper. She wrote on hotel stationery with a fountain pen because she liked the way ink made time visible. He wrote in a spiral notebook with a pencil because erasing felt like practicing forgiveness. They never decided to exchange letters, but somehow the letters began to find their way to each other's doors, slipped under, left on a bench, tucked inside a script. Her letter. "I don't know if I believe in timing anymore. I believe in readiness. We built so many rooms in ourselves to survive the noise. I like that the rooms we're building now have windows." His letter. "I thought repair would feel like punishment. It feels like craft. I keep learning that love is not a headline. It is a tool you keep clean even on the days you don't use it." They didn't rush to respond. Sometimes a letter requires a scene to answer for you. Sometimes a look from across the slate does the work. The scene in the lantern room. Mid-March gave them the scene the script had been quietly promising since page 1. They had rebuilt the mechanism. The great Fresnel lens waited like a cathedral window that happened to be a circle. The engineer, her, had done the math and not apologized. The keeper, him, had learned to let go of old rituals and not pretend it didn't cost him something. The scene asked for almost nothing, just a switch, a hum, a rotation, and 2 faces learning how to stand in a turning light. The camera placed itself where the light would bless it and swore not to flinch. When she pulled the breaker and the lamp took breath, the glass became a chorus. Light unfurled like a silk banner and then behaved like discipline. It turned. It swept the room with patience. It found both of them, then left them, then returned as if remembering a duty. "Don't move," the director whispered. "Let it move through you." They stood in the slow pulse. On the second rotation, she looked at him, really looked, and he, who had planned to keep his face like a quiet harbor, failed at that plan. The failure was beautiful and unrepeatable. No one said cut. They stayed with it until the moment finished itself. When the director finally exhaled, everyone else remembered how. The island, pleased with its own light, retreated into fog as if modesty had come late but earnestly. The call that didn't scare them. News always finds a way to misbehave. In late March, a blog with more bandwidth than standards posted a rumor that the set had become a reunion of dangerous intensity. The headline tried to pick at scars it hadn't earned. The director's phone pinged like a slot machine. The producers asked for calm statements. The publicist proposed inoculation by honesty. Jamie and Dakota met in the lighthouse's shadow at noon, where the sun made the stones look older than law. They didn't need to coordinate positions. They had learned and unlearned this dance before. "We can ignore it," he said. "We can, but we don't have to hide," she answered. "Our work is good. Our boundaries are real." He watched a gull glide like a shrug. "I'm not afraid anymore," he said, and the way he said it made the shadow look shorter. "Me neither," she said. "Let them write weather reports. We'll keep building the lighthouse." They released a paragraph signed by both. "We are grateful to be working together again on a story about repair. We hope the film speaks for itself. Until then, we'll be on set, doing the work." The paragraph said almost nothing, which is to say it said exactly enough. Spring, the mainland. They returned to the mainland for a week of interiors. The rented house had a kitchen with a table that looked like it had heard poems and arguments in equal measure. Between setups, they made toast and talked about small, practical kinds of happiness. Good socks, a book that makes you close it because it's too true, a nap no one interrupts. One afternoon, the power flickered and then failed, the island reminding them from afar how to be patient. Crew scattered in useful ways. Candles appeared with improbable speed. Someone found a deck of cards. Someone else sang, on purpose and then by accident, a lullaby. In the slow candlelight, Jamie and Dakota sat on the floor with their backs against opposite cabinets and let the quiet do its slow medicine. "What do you want the most from this time?" she asked. "To earn the ease I feel," he said. "To know it's not an accident." "And you?" he asked. "To leave this film more tender," she said. "With others. With myself. With everything that didn't go the way I once insisted it had to." The lights returned mid-sentence. No one cheered. They simply stood and went back to work, which felt like a kind of vow. The farewell scene. On a bright day with polite wind, they filmed the final scene, the lighthouse fully repaired, its beam polite and resolute. The two of them walking down the path in opposite directions. She to the ferry, he to the keeper's cottage. The director wanted no music, only feet on gravel, the grammar of departure. They rehearsed once and didn't like it. They talked about the difference between tidy and true. They rehearsed again, smaller. The third time, the goodbye became what goodbyes try to be when they're working. Not a denial of love, but a promise not to injure it further. "Action," said the director, practically to himself. They walked. At the fork, they slowed. He tipped his cap as if remembering a world where gestures still mean things. She smiled in the way people smile when gratitude and ache share a table. "Cut," the director whispered, and the gulls pretended not to applaud. When the slate clapped for the final time, the crew exhaled a season. Hugs happened without speeches. The camera was wrapped as if tucking in a child. The lighthouse kept doing what lighthouses do. Carry light without complaint. After. The film edited itself toward coherence like a tide learning its shoreline. The first rough cut arrived in June. A study in restraint, patience with shadows, performances that respected the audience enough not to shout. The score was mostly wind, and when the strings came, they arrived as though they had walked. Private test screenings in small rooms produced the kind of silence you trust. One viewer cried in the steady way that means repair rather than rupture. Another wrote on the feedback card, "It made me want to call someone and apologize for being young." A distributor signed on. A fall festival slipped them a good slot. The island sent weather as a blessing. The premiere. In September, they stood at the edge of a red carpet that had the decency to be short. Camera flashes offered their ritual. Microphones presented their appetites. The director took a step to the side, leaving the two of them framed by a lighthouse printed on the marquee in small, honest letters. "Are you ready?" Jamie asked. "I think so," Dakota said. "You?" "I'm ready for the film to belong to other people," he said, and meant it. They walked. They posed the way you pose when you understand that grace is a posture. They answered questions not by reciting stories but by protecting what needed protecting. Yes, we're grateful. Yes, the island was a character. Yes, we learned things we didn't know we needed to learn. Inside the theater, the lights dimmed. The screen found the shape of the sea. The first note of wind arrived as if it had been waiting in the ducts. For 2 hours, they watched versions of themselves learn to be devoted to a place and, therefore, to each other's humanity. When the film ended, something rare happened. The audience didn't clap right away. They sat in the articulate hush that follows true things. Then came the applause, not frantic, not performative, but sustained, like weather you can count on. Jamie turned to Dakota in the dark and saw her eyes shine with the kind of tears that don't punish, only bless. She reached for his hand under the armrest and squeezed once, not as a signal, not as a code, but as a simple sentence. "Thank you." He squeezed back. "Me too." A winter of second chances. They didn't issue a statement about the nature of their relationship. They didn't need to. The film had done the talking. What people saw on screen wasn't scandal or nostalgia. It was the humility of two artists who had learned to be kind custodians of each other's work. In interviews that winter, asked what the film meant to them, they said versions of the same thing. It's about repair, Dakota would say. The kind that doesn't demand a parade. It's about carrying light without believing you own it, Jamie would add. And about weather. Always about weather. Privately, life took on the ease of friendships that refused to be small. They sent each other books again, and the occasional ridiculous meme, and the sort of photos that don't flatter but do tell the truth. The dog asleep in an inelegant shape, the sky being smug about a sunset, a plate of food that looks better than it tastes. On New Year's Eve, just before midnight, Dakota stood on a balcony above a city that sparkled like it had borrowed everyone's jewelry at once. Her phone buzzed with a message from Jamie. A photograph of the lighthouse in early snow, the beam doing its honest work. Happy New Year, the text read. Thank you for this one. She typed, erased, typed again, then sent. Happy New Year. See you at the next coast. Below her, fireworks began their bright negotiations with darkness. She watched for a while, then went inside, where the rooms of her new year waited with their patient windows. The lighthouse keeps turning. In the spring of 2026, Winter Sun opened quietly in theaters that smelled of wood and popcorn. A combination that makes nearly everyone better. People left with their coats unbuttoned and their voices lowered, as if stepping out of church. Lovers argued kindly on sidewalks. Old friends called each other after decades of not. Children asked about lighthouses and were offered metaphors they'd understand later. On a rainy Thursday, Jamie walked alone along a pier and let the sea do its unending arithmetic. A passerby recognized him and didn't interrupt, just nodded the nod you give someone who has carried a lantern well. A continent away, Dakota sat by a window and wrote a letter she would not need to send. We did the work, she wrote. Not to rewrite our past, but to give our present better manners. The light turns. That's enough. Somewhere, on an island that pretends not to care about cinema, a beam of light rotated, telling the night what it needed to know. There is danger, and there is guidance, and on a good evening there is both, and someone has promised to keep watch. The lighthouse kept turning, and two people, who had once learned the hard way how to let go, learned a different lesson now. How to hold, gently, briefly, without ownership, the miracle of a second chance.